My fiancée insisted on wearing her ex's locket, saying, "It's a part of my history." I said, "History is important." So I made her part of mine. Her jaw dropped when I took back the engagement ring from her. I, 29M, thought I knew everything about the woman I was planning to marry. 6 months of engagement, 2 years together before that, and countless conversations about our future. But apparently, I missed the part where her ex-boyfriend would still be hanging around her neck in the form of a silver locket. It started 3 weeks before our wedding when she began wearing this delicate silver pendant I'd never seen before. When I asked about it, she got this dreamy look in her eyes and explained it was a gift from her college boyfriend, the one who'd apparently been the love of her life before he moved across the country for his career. She claimed it contained a picture of them together from their graduation day. The way she touched that locket when she talked about it made my stomach turn. Her fingers would trace the edges like she was caressing a memory, and her voice got soft in a way it never did when she talked about us. When I suggested maybe it wasn't appropriate to wear another man's gift to our wedding, she became defensive. She told me it was part of her history, part of who she was, and I needed to respect that. I tried to be understanding at first. Everyone has a past, and I wasn't naive enough to think I was her first love. But wearing a token of that love to our wedding? That felt like bringing a ghost to our altar. When I pressed the issue, she got angry. She accused me of being insecure and controlling. She said I was trying to erase her past, which wasn't what I wanted at all. I just wanted her to prioritize our future. The arguments escalated over the following days. She refused to take it off, even to bed. I'd catch her staring at herself in the mirror, adjusting the chain, making sure it was visible above her neckline. During a particularly heated discussion, I asked her directly if she still had feelings for him. She paused too long before answering, and when she finally said no, her eyes didn't meet mine. That pause told me everything I needed to know. I decided to do some research. Social media made it easy enough to find him. Successful architect in Seattle, exactly the kind of guy who'd give meaningful jewelry. But what I found next made my blood run cold. They'd been messaging each other, not just recently, but throughout our entire relationship. The messages I could see from his public posts showed a familiarity that went way beyond friendship. Inside jokes, references to shared memories, and worst of all, her responses that used pet names I'd never heard her use. When I confronted her about the messages, she claimed they were just friends. Old friends who occasionally caught up. But friends don't typically send photos of themselves wearing gifts from each other with captions about never forgetting. Friends don't have conversations about what might have been if circumstances had been different. And friends definitely don't make plans to meet up when one of them is supposed to be planning a wedding to someone else. The breaking point came when I found out she'd been planning to visit him during what was supposed to be our bachelor and bachelorette party weekend. She'd told me she was going to a spa weekend with her girlfriends, but her flight confirmation email told a different story. Seattle, 3 days. Hotel reservation for 1. Which somehow felt worse than if she'd booked for 2. At least then I'd know she was being honest about her intentions. I realized then that I wasn't just competing with a memory anymore. I was competing with an active relationship that had never really ended. The locket wasn't about history at all. It was about hope. Hope that maybe things would work out differently this time. She kept insisting that history was important, that her past relationships had shaped who she was, and I needed to accept that. She was right about one thing. History is important, and I was about to make her part of mine in a way she'd never forget. I waited until 2 days before the wedding. All the guests had arrived. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for the next evening, and she was glowing with what I now realized wasn't anticipation for our marriage, but excitement about seeing him again. She'd convinced me to let her take that spa weekend, after all, claiming she needed to decompress before the big day. I'd agreed, knowing exactly where she was really going. While she was in Seattle, probably deciding whether to go through with marrying me or finally running away with her true love, I was making preparations of my own. I called both our families and asked them to gather at my parents' house. I told them there was an important announcement about the wedding that couldn't wait. When she returned from her trip, she seemed different. More distant, more conflicted. The locket was still there, of course, but now she kept touching it nervously, like it was burning her skin. I asked her how the spa was, and she gave me generic answers about relaxation and pampering that anyone could have Googled. When I asked to see photos, she claimed she'd been too focused on unwinding to take any. That evening, I suggested we go for a walk. Just the two of us, to reconnect before the chaos of the wedding weekend. She seemed relieved, probably thinking I was finally letting go of my concerns about the locket and her mysterious trip. As we walked through the park where I'd proposed to her 8 months earlier, I told her I'd been thinking about what she'd said regarding history. She looked hopeful then, probably thinking I was about to apologize for being controlling. I told her she was absolutely right, that history shapes us, that our past relationships teach us valuable lessons about love and commitment. She nodded eagerly, her hand instinctively going to that damn locket again. Then I told her I'd learned something important about my own history over the past few weeks. I'd learned that I deserved someone who was fully present in our relationship, someone who wasn't carrying a torch for another man while planning to marry me. I'd learned that love shouldn't require competing with ghosts or active communication with ex-lovers. The color drained from her face as she realized where this conversation was heading. She started to protest, to explain, but I held up my hand. I told her I knew about Seattle, about the messages, about the real reason she insisted on wearing that locket. I explained that while she was right about history being important, she was about to become part of mine in a way she hadn't expected. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the engagement ring I'd removed from her jewelry box while she was away. She gasped and looked down at her naked finger as if seeing it for the first time. I told her she could keep the locket since it meant so much to her, but she wouldn't be keeping my ring. Our engagement was over. She tried to argue, to explain that nothing had happened in Seattle, that she'd realized during the trip that I was the one she wanted to marry. But her story kept changing. First, nothing happened. Then, they'd only talked. Then, they'd kissed, but it didn't mean anything. Finally, she admitted they'd spent the night together but claimed it was closure, a final goodbye to their past. I listened to each version of the truth get progressively more honest, and with each revision, I felt more certain about my decision. This wasn't just about physical infidelity. This was about emotional betrayal that had been happening throughout our entire relationship. The locket was just the symbol of something much deeper. When she realized I wasn't going to change my mind, she became angry. She accused me of being unforgiving, of punishing her for being honest about her feelings. She claimed everyone has doubts before marriage, that her trip to Seattle had actually confirmed that I was the right choice. But if I was the right choice, why did she need to sleep with someone else to figure that out? I told her she was right, that everyone has doubts, but most people don't resolve those doubts by cheating with their ex-boyfriend days before their wedding. Most people don't spend months secretly communicating with former lovers while planning a future with someone else. And most people definitely don't insist on wearing another person's jewelry as they walk down the aisle. As I walked away, leaving her standing in the park with her precious locket and no engagement ring, she called after me. She said she'd made a mistake, that she'd choose me over him if I'd just give her another chance. But that was exactly the problem. I didn't want to be chosen over someone else. I wanted to be the only choice. Update 1. The aftermath was about as messy as you'd expect when you call off a wedding 2 days before the ceremony. Both families were shocked when I explained the situation at the emergency gathering I'd arranged. Her parents were devastated and kept insisting their daughter would never do such a thing. My parents were supportive but worried about the financial implications of all the canceled vendors. She showed up at my apartment that night, locket conspicuously absent from her neck for the first time in weeks. She begged me to reconsider, promised to cut all contact with him, even offered to get rid of the locket. But it was too little, too late. Trust isn't something you can just restore by throwing away jewelry. The hardest part was dealing with all the guests who'd traveled for the wedding. I took responsibility for the cancellation, sent out messages explaining that we'd realized we weren't right for each other. Some people were understanding, others were clearly annoyed about their wasted time and money. A few of her friends accused me of overreacting, claiming that what she did wasn't really cheating since we weren't married yet. That attitude told me everything I needed to know about the kind of people she surrounded herself with, and by extension, the kind of person she was. When you're planning to marry someone, you don't hedge your bets by maintaining backup relationships. You don't test your commitment by sleeping with someone else. And you definitely don't minimize that betrayal by claiming it doesn't count because you weren't technically married yet. Update 2. 3 months later, I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved to Seattle. Apparently, her closure with the architect had turned into something more permanent. Part of me felt vindicated that my instincts had been right. She hadn't been conflicted about marrying me because of normal pre-wedding jitters. She'd been conflicted because she was genuinely torn between two people. I also learned that this wasn't the first time she'd done something like this. A friend who'd known her longer than I had mentioned that she'd cheated on her previous boyfriend too. Not with the architect, but with me. Those early dates when she was supposedly single, she'd still been in a relationship. I'd been the other man without even knowing it, which explained why it took her so long to introduce me to her friends and family. The pattern was clear. She was someone who couldn't end one relationship before starting another. She needed overlap, needed to know she had options before she could commit to anything. The locket hadn't been about history at all. It had been about keeping her options open, maintaining an emotional connection that could be revived if her current relationship didn't work out. Update 3. A year later, I'm in a completely different place. I started therapy to work through the betrayal and understand why I'd ignored so many red flags. The therapist helped me realize that her behavior had been consistent throughout our relationship, but I'd chosen to interpret questionable actions in the most charitable way possible. The secretiveness about her past, the way she'd compartmentalized different areas of her life, the defensiveness when I asked about certain friends or former relationships. None of it had been normal relationship behavior, but I convinced myself it was because I wanted to believe in us. I'm dating someone new now, someone who's refreshingly transparent about her past and present. When she tells me about her day, I don't have to wonder if she's editing out important details. When she gets a message from a friend, she doesn't hide her phone screen. When she wears jewelry, I know it's because she likes how it looks, not because it's a shrine to someone else. The best part is that my current girlfriend finds the Locket story as appalling as I do. She can't imagine prioritizing an ex's feelings over her current partner's comfort, especially about something as symbolic as jewelry for a wedding. Her reaction confirmed that my expectations hadn't been unreasonable or controlling. Looking back, I realized the locket was never really the issue. It was just the most visible symbol of a much deeper problem. She'd never fully committed to our relationship because she'd never fully ended her previous one. The locket was her way of keeping that door open, maintaining a connection that should have been closed the moment she said yes to my proposal. History is indeed important, and I'm grateful she became part of mine. Not as my wife, which would have been a disaster, but as a valuable lesson about the difference between someone who chooses you and someone who settles for you, while keeping other options available. She taught me what real commitment looks like by showing me what it doesn't look like. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is discovering someone's true character before you're legally bound to them. She did me a favor by being unable to hide her divided loyalties. That locket around her neck saved me from a marriage that would have been built on a foundation of lies and emotional infidelity. The engagement ring I took back? I eventually sold it and used the money for a solo trip to Europe, something I'd always wanted to do but had been saving money for the wedding instead. Best investment I ever made. Unlike that locket she treasured so much, my memories from that trip are mine alone, untainted by betrayal or divided loyalty. She can keep her history with the architect. I'm much more interested in making new history with someone who actually wants to be part of it.